A black American soldier tore the dress of a Japanese woman POW. What happened next shocked everyone. Okinawa, 1945. Monsoon rain. Canvas wards and barbed wire. A medic saw death hidden beneath fabric. A live grenade, wired tight. One motion to save lives. One rip of cloth. But all they saw was a black soldier standing over a Japanese woman, her dress torn open. Whispers turned to charges. Mercy became assault. And the weight of two wars, one abroad, one at home, closed in to crush him. Then she spoke. An enemy woman, forbidden to testify, rose and told a truth no one wanted to hear. When the flood came and the wire broke, would courage be enough to save the innocent? And when a corrupt officer's lies finally unraveled in front of everyone, would justice arrive in time? Or would the system bury the truth to protect its own? The monsoon came fast that afternoon. Rain hammered the canvas tents of the field hospital, and winds snapped the flaps like gunfire. PFC Langston Cole pressed a bandage against a soldier's shrapnel wound, his hands steady, even as sweat dripped from his chin. All around him, men groaned on narrow cots. Children whimpered behind the wire fence that separated the Japanese civilians from the American troops. Langston was one of 6 black medics assigned to this sector near Yonabaru. The work never stopped. Malaria, infected wounds, exhaustion. The war chewed people up and spat them out broken. "Cole, we got another one coming in," Corporal Shine Wheeler called from the tent entrance. His voice was tight. A teenage boy staggered through the rain. His Japanese uniform was soaked with blood. Sergeant Ray Harlan, a white MP, followed close behind, rifle ready. The boy, Sato, collapsed near the cots where Hana Ishikawa sat with 3 orphan children. She was a Japanese schoolteacher, classified now as a prisoner of war. She wore a simple gray dress, torn at the hem from days of hard living. Langston moved toward them. As he knelt beside Hana to check on the children, he saw it. A hard bulge beneath her sash, wired tight against her ribs. His breath caught. A grenade. Sato had forced it on her. Langston could see the terror in the boy's eyes, the trembling in Hana's hands. There was no time to think. Langston grabbed the fabric of Hana's dress and tore it along the seam. The cloth ripped with a sharp sound. He yanked the grenade free, turned, and sprinted into the rain. Mud sucked at his boots. He hurled the device into a flooded shell crater 20 yards away. The explosion was muffled, swallowed by water and storm. But the tent shook. Lanterns swung. Someone screamed. When Langston turned back, Hana clutched the torn edges of her dress to her chest. Her face was pale, but she was alive. The children were safe. Sergeant Harlan burst in with 2 other MPs, rifles raised. All they saw was a black soldier standing over a Japanese woman with her dress torn open. Harlan's face went hard. "Cole, hands behind your back, now." Langston raised his palms slowly. "Sergeant, there was a grenade. I had to save it." Harlan snapped handcuffs around Langston's wrists. The metal bit into his skin. Around the tent, white soldiers and MPs stared. A few black medics looked away, afraid to get pulled into whatever this was. Hana's voice cut through the noise. "Wait, please wait." Everyone turned. She spoke in careful, clear English. "That man saved us." Harlan blinked. Lieutenant Whitaker, the medical officer, stepped forward. He was a lean man from Georgia, always polished, even in the mud. "You speak English?" Hana nodded. Her hands still held the torn fabric of her dress, but her eyes were steady. "Yes, the grenade was hidden. He pulled it away before it could kill the children." Langston's heart pounded. Maybe this would be over quickly. Maybe someone would listen. Whitaker's pen hovered over his field notebook. He wrote something, then looked up. "We'll need statements. From everyone." His voice was flat, professional. "Ishikawa, you'll be moved to separate quarters for questioning. Cole, you're confined to the supply tent until we sort this out." "But sir, she just told you," Wheeler started. "That's enough, Corporal." Whitaker closed his notebook with a snap. "Sergeant Harlan, take him." Harlan pulled Langston toward the exit. Rain soaked them both instantly. Behind them, Hannah stood wrapped in a blanket someone had handed her. She met Langston's eyes for a moment. Then the tent flap fell. In the supply tent, Langston sat on a crate, hands still cuffed. Water dripped from his uniform onto the canvas floor. Outside, he could hear soldiers talking, their voices rising and falling like the storm. By nightfall, the whispers had started. A black medic tore a Japanese woman's dress. The story spread through the camp like wildfire, growing uglier with each retelling. The rain stopped just before dawn. Langston hadn't slept. They'd finally uncuffed him, but he was still confined to the segregated medic's tent. He sat on his bunk, washing dried blood from bandages in a tin basin. The water turned pink, then brown. Wheeler sat across from him, fidgeting with a cigarette he didn't light. "They're saying things, Cole. Bad things." "I know. Harlan's got to listen to her. She told them what happened." Langston wrung out a bandage and draped it over the basin's edge. "Whitaker's writing the report. You think he cares what she said?" Wheeler didn't answer. A mail clerk ducked into the tent, yawning, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. "Cole, got one for you." Langston took the envelope. The paper was soft from handling, the corners worn. His mother's handwriting. He'd seen it 1,000 times, but it still made his chest tighten. He opened it carefully. The letter was weeks old, dated May 20th. Black censor bars crossed out names, but he could read between them. "Langston, they hung a man last week. You remember the Johnson boy? He looked at a white woman wrong, they said. They found him in the creek. Your daddy and I are praying every night you keep your head down over there. Don't give them a reason. Baby, please don't give them a reason." His hands shook. He folded the letter and tucked it into his jacket pocket, next to his heart. Wheeler saw his face. "We should push back. Tell Harlan to make this right." "And get the whole unit in trouble?" Langston shook his head. "No, we wait. We do our jobs." Outside, the chow line formed. Soldiers laughed and joked, but when Langston passed, a few went quiet. A white cook muttered something under his breath. Another man snickered. A runner appeared at the tent entrance. "Cole, Wheeler, you're back on duty. But Cole, you don't treat female POWs. Orders from Lieutenant Whitaker." Langston nodded slowly. He grabbed his aid pouch and followed Wheeler into the morning light. The aid station smelled of iodine and sweat. Langston moved between cots, checking pulses, changing dressings. His hands worked automatically, but his mind stayed sharp. Across the tent, Hana sat at a translator's table, helping a Japanese elder explain his symptoms to a white doctor. She'd been moved there after the incident. Close enough to see, too far to speak to. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, lay on a cot near the translator table. Her breathing was shallow, her skin hot, fever. Langston could see it from where he stood, but he couldn't cross the invisible line Whitaker had drawn. Hana noticed too. She looked at the child, then at Langston. Their eyes met for just a second. Hana tilted her head slightly toward the girl, then glanced at the medicine cabinet on the far wall. Langston understood. He turned to Wheeler. "Pneumonia, probably. She needs sulfa powder and fluids." Wheeler frowned. "I'll get it." He brought the supplies and administered them while Langston watched from a respectful distance. The girl's breathing eased within the hour. When her fever finally broke, Hana bowed slightly from across the aisle. Langston nodded back. It was small, careful, but it was something. Lieutenant Whitaker appeared in the doorway, arms folded. He watched them both for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he turned and left. Later, at the mess line, Langston noticed Hana standing near the wire fence with the children. A cook was handing out rice, but when Hana reached the front, he shook his head. POWs get cold rations. The children looked hungry. Hana didn't argue. She stepped back. Langston waited until Sergeant Harlan turned to check a roster. Then he slid his own portion of hot rice through the gap in the wire. Hana took it without a word. One of the orphans smiled. A corporal standing nearby saw the whole thing. He leaned toward another soldier and smirked. "Got a taste for the enemy, Cole?" Harlan's head snapped around. "Button it, soldier." The corporal shut his mouth, but the damage was done. The insult hung in the humid air like smoke. By evening, the gossip had grown teeth. Langston stood in the chow line, tray in hand, listening to whispers that weren't quite whispers anymore. Heard he ripped into her right there in the tent. MPs had to pull him off. What do you expect? They don't have any self-control. Langston kept his eyes forward. His jaw was tight, but he didn't speak. Getting angry would only prove them right. His mother's letter pressed against his chest like a warning. Harlan stood near the serving line, watching. When a clerk started to repeat the story again, louder this time, for effect, Harlan stepped forward. "Keep to facts, soldier." The clerk swallowed. "Just saying what I heard, Sergeant." "Then hear this. Say it again and you're on latrine duty for a week." The line went quiet. But Harlan didn't say what actually happened. He didn't tell them about the grenade or the children or Hana's testimony. He just shut down the gossip and walked away. Langston's tray sat untouched. Across the compound, beyond the barbed wire, Hana stood with the orphans. She was braiding a little girl's hair, her hands patient and steady. She looked up. Their eyes met through the fence. Langston nodded once, just once. Hana nodded back. It was a tiny act of defiance, a shared acknowledgement that the truth still existed, even if no one else would say it. But it was also dangerous. A few soldiers noticed the exchange. One nudged another and grinned. A storm siren moaned across the camp. Soldiers scrambled to tie down tents and secure supplies. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and salt from the ocean. Harlan appeared at Langston's side as the first drops began to fall. "There's going to be a hearing tomorrow. Informal, just statements. Don't make waves, Cole." Langston looked at him. "And if I tell the truth?" "The truth's already in the report." Harlan's voice was low, almost apologetic. "Just don't make it worse." He walked away, leaving Langston standing in the rain. The hearing tent was set up near the motor pool, far from the hospital. The ground outside was slick with red Okinawa mud. Langston arrived in a pressed uniform, his hands clean, his jaw tight. Wheeler sat in the back row, trying to look confident. Lieutenant Whitaker sat at a folding table with a stack of files. Sergeant Harlan stood to one side, arms crossed. A young legal clerk sat ready with a typewriter. Hana was brought in under guard. She wore the same gray dress, but someone had given her thread, and she'd stitched the tear closed with careful, even stitches. She sat on a wooden chair, hands folded in her lap, and looked straight ahead. Whitaker opened a file. "Miss Ishikawa, you're here to provide a statement regarding the incident on June 12th. Do you understand?" "Yes. Tell us what happened, in your own words." Hana took a breath. "A young soldier, Sato, was bleeding. He was afraid. He forced a grenade on me and told me to hide it. There were children beneath the cots. I was going to walk outside with it, but PFC Cole saw it first. He pulled it free and threw it away. He saved my life and the lives of those children." The clerk's typewriter clattered. Whitaker's pen paused. Harlan shifted his weight but said nothing. Whitaker leaned back. "And you expect us to believe a wounded enemy conscript gave you a live grenade?" "It is the truth." "Where is this Sato now?" "In the infirmary. He is very sick." Whitaker made a note. "This could be enemy storytelling, designed to protect one of your own." Hana's eyes flashed, but her voice stayed calm. "I am not protecting him. I am telling you what happened." Whitaker closed the file. "We'll take this under advisement. The board will reconvene pending additional statements." "Additional statements?" Langston spoke for the first time. "Sir, she just told you." "That's enough, Private." Whitaker's voice was ice. "You're dismissed." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, but the air still felt heavy. Harlan caught up with Langston as he walked back toward the barracks. "I believe her," Harlan said quietly. Langston stopped. "Then say so." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple, Sergeant." Harlan looked away. "Paper runs slow in the Army, Cole. I'll see what I can do." But Langston knew what that meant. Nothing would change, not yet. He returned to the aid station, neither cleared nor condemned, and picked up a bandage roll. There was work to do. The afternoon light filtered through patched canvas. Langston worked quietly in the aid station, his movements careful and precise. Across the tent, Hannah sat at the translator's table with a scrap of bandage thread repairing the tear in her dress. Her fingers moved with the same steady patience she used with the children. A little boy whimpered on a nearby cot. Langston reached into his pocket and pulled out a dented harmonica. He played a soft tune, just a few notes, nothing fancy. The boy's crying stopped. He blinked up at Langston with wide eyes. Hannah glanced over. For a moment, something passed between them. Not words, just recognition. Two people trying to ease suffering in a place built for violence. Near the infirmary cots, Sato lay wrapped in thin blankets. His wound was healing, but fever still came and went. He muttered in Japanese, his voice weak and broken. Hannah set down her sewing and moved to his bedside. She listened, then translated quietly for Wheeler, who stood nearby with a clipboard. "He's apologizing," Hannah said, over and over. "For what?" Wheeler asked. Hannah's face was grave. "He says a man told him to give me the grenade. A man dressed as a civilian, but not really a civilian. Someone who shares information with the Americans." Langston stopped playing. He looked at Hannah. Then at Sato. "An informant?" "Yes." Hannah's voice dropped lower. "He says this man forced him. Told him it was the only way to avoid shame, that surrender was worse than death." "Where is this man now?" Langston asked. "Still here, disguised, watching." Wheeler's jaw tightened. "We should tell Harlan." But before anyone could move, a runner appeared at the tent entrance. He handed a folded paper to Wheeler. "From Lieutenant Whitaker. Formal hearing tomorrow morning. New statements have been submitted." Wheeler read it and cursed under his breath. "They're building something, Cole. This isn't over." Langston tucked the harmonica back into his pocket. Outside, the sun was sinking. Insects buzzed in the humid air. Somewhere in the camp, someone was laughing. But in the aid station, the silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Night came thick and warm. Langston lay on his bunk in the segregated barracks tent, staring at the canvas above him. Around him, other men snored. The radio in the corner played low. A stateside broadcast about victory gardens and war bonds. It all felt far away. Wheeler sat on the edge of his cot, cleaning his canteen. "Say the word, Cole. I'll speak up tomorrow. Tell them what I saw." "And get yourself dragged into this?" Langston shook his head. "No." "So you're just going to let them do this?" "I'm going to tell the truth, same as before." Wheeler sighed and lay back. Within minutes, his breathing evened out. But Langston couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the moment, the grenade, the torn fabric, the explosion. He'd done the right thing. He knew he'd done the right thing. But in a place like this, doing right didn't always matter. He pulled his mother's letter from his jacket and read it again by the dim glow of a hooded lantern. Her words were careful, shaped by years of knowing what happened to black men who stood out, who made noise, who refused to bow. He took out a pencil and a scrap of paper. Writing a letter took time. Every word would be read by censors. Anything too honest would be cut out with black ink. "Dear Mama," he wrote, "I'm safe. The work is hard, but good. Something happened here that people misunderstood. I tore a dress to save a life. Some folks saw the wrong thing. But I know what I did, and so does the woman I helped. That has to be enough." He folded the letter and tucked it into an envelope. The mail wouldn't leave for days, maybe weeks. By the time she read it, everything might be over, one way or another. Outside, the sky began to lighten. Pink crept along the horizon. Boots approached the tent. An MP appeared in the entrance, his face shadowed. "Gull, you're wanted at the hearing tent." Langston stood, buttoned his jacket, and tucked his mother's letter into his breast pocket, right over his heart. The hearing tent felt smaller than before. The morning air was still cool, but inside, tension made everything feel close and stifling. Langston stood at attention, hands at his sides. Across from him sat Lieutenant Whitaker, a stack of papers in front of him. Sergeant Harlan stood to the side, his face unreadable. Hannah was brought in again, escorted by 2 MPs. She sat in the same wooden chair, her back straight. Whitaker opened a folder. "We've received additional testimony regarding PFC Cole's conduct." Harlan's eyes flickered. He hadn't known this was coming. Whitaker pulled out 2 typed statements. "A cook and a transport driver have both reported a pattern of overfamiliar behavior between PFC Cole and enemy personnel. Specifically, sharing rations and attempting unauthorized contact." Langston's stomach dropped. The rice. Someone had reported the rice. "Those statements are false, sir," Langston said. "I gave food to hungry children. That's not us. You were observed multiple times engaging with a female enemy prisoner in ways that violate protocol." Hannah stood suddenly. "This is not true. He has done nothing improper." Whitaker didn't look at her. "Miss Ishikawa, you're here to answer questions, not make statements. Sit down." "I will not sit while you accuse an innocent man." "Sergeant Harlan, remove her if she can't control herself." Harlan hesitated. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then he stepped forward, but his hand didn't touch Hannah. "Ma'am, please." Hannah sat, but her eyes burned. Whitaker continued. "Based on these statements and the initial incident, PFC Cole is hereby suspended from all medical duties, effective immediately. He will surrender his aid pouch and medic insignia pending further review." Wheeler, sitting in the back, stood up. "Sir, this is—" "You're dismissed, Corporal." Langston's hands shook, but he kept them still. He unbuckled his aid pouch and set it on the table. Then he unpinned the small medic tab from his jacket and placed it beside the pouch. His hands felt empty, useless. "You're confined to non-medical duties until this matter is resolved," Whitaker said. "Dismissed." Outside, the sun was bright and cruel. Langston walked past the wire fence. Japanese civilians watched him go. Some looked away. Others stared with something that might have been pity. By noon, the heat was suffocating. Langston stood outside the wire fence, watching Wheeler and another medic work inside the translator tent. Hannah moved between the children, checking foreheads, adjusting blankets. But without Langston's authority, supplies were scarce. A little boy's fever spiked. His skin burned. Hannah pressed a wet cloth to his forehead, but it wasn't enough. She looked toward the fence where Langston stood. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Langston understood. The boy needed sulfa powder, maybe antibiotics, things only medics could access. He turned to Wheeler, who was packing supplies nearby. "The kid needs medicine." Wheeler glanced at the MP standing guard near the fence. The MP, a young private, looked nervous. "I can't just hand over medical supplies without authorization." "Then get authorization." "From who? Whitaker?" Langston's jaw tightened. He looked at the boy, then at Hannah. She held the child close, whispering something soft in Japanese. Sergeant Harlan appeared from the motor pool, clipboard in hand. He saw the scene. Langston at the fence, Hannah with the sick child, Wheeler frozen between duty and conscience. Harlan stopped. He looked at the boy, then at Hannah, then at Langston. For a long moment, no one moved. Finally, Harlan gave a small nod to Wheeler. "Give her what she needs." Wheeler's shoulders sagged with relief. He passed a packet of sulfa powder and a canteen of clean water through the fence. Hannah took them with a bow. The boy's fever broke an hour later. But two white soldiers standing near the mess tent saw everything. One leaned toward the other and muttered something. They both glanced at Langston, then walked toward Lieutenant Whitaker's quarters. Harlan watched them go. His face was tight. He knew what came next. Langston knew too. This wasn't mercy. This was evidence. The infirmary smelled of antiseptic and sweat. Langston sat on a stool near Sato's cot, not as a medic, but as a visitor. Technically, he wasn't breaking any rules. Wheeler stood by the door, keeping watch. Sato's eyes were clearer now. The fever had passed, but guilt still weighed on him. He looked at Langston and spoke in halting Japanese. Hana, who'd been allowed in to translate for another patient, moved closer. She listened, then turned to Langston. He says he's sorry. He says the man who ordered him to give me the grenade is still here. Who is he? Langston asked. Sato spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. Hana translated carefully. A man pretending to be a civilian, but he works for the Americans. He gives information to Lieutenant Whitaker. Sato saw them exchange papers, saw Whitaker's initials on them. Langston's blood went cold. Whitaker's protecting an informant? Hana nodded. If I tell the truth about what happened, it exposes this man. And if this man is exposed, Whitaker loses his source. His career suffers. So the hearing isn't about justice, Langston said quietly. It's about covering up. Sato fumbled in his blanket and pulled out a torn scrap of paper, part of a memo form. He handed it to Hana. She studied it, then showed Langston. There were initials in the corner. J.W. J. Whitaker, Langston said. Hana tucked the paper into her sleeve, then into the hem of her dress where she'd hidden the repair stitching. This is proof. Boots echoed outside. An MP appeared at the door. Ishikawa, you're being transferred. New orders. You're moving to the razor wire pen for security reasons. Hana stood. She looked at Langston. He wanted to say something, to promise that this would end, but he couldn't. She bowed slightly. Then she was gone, escorted between two armed guards. Wheeler exhaled. They're separating you two on purpose. I know. What do we do? Langston didn't answer. He stared at the empty space where Hana had stood, the truth hidden in the stitches of her dress. The razor wire pen sat at the edge of the camp, surrounded by 3 layers of barbed fencing. Inside, Japanese women and children huddled on thin mats. Kerosene lamps flickered as darkness fell. Blackout rules meant no bright lights, no sounds that might carry. Hana arrived with her small bundle of belongings. The women made space for her near the children. An elderly woman who spoke a little English nodded in greeting. You're the teacher, the woman said. Yes, they say you defended an American soldier. Hana set down her bundle and looked around the pen. The conditions were worse here. Less food, no medical supplies, mud seeping under the canvas tarps. I told the truth, that's all. The children gathered around her, their faces thin and tired. She checked them one by one, feeling for fever, looking at old bandages that needed changing. One little girl tugged at Hana's sleeve. Will the medic come? Hana's throat tightened. No, not here. Outside the wire, an MP paced, bored and tired. Farther away, at the edge of the light, Langston stood watching. He couldn't get close, he couldn't help, but he was there. Hana saw him. She didn't wave or call out. She simply turned back to the children and began organizing their small area, making it as safe and dry as possible. The elderly woman whispered, "What will you do?" Hana pulled thread from her pocket, the same thread she'd used to repair her dress. She began stitching a tear in a child's blanket, her hands steady and sure. Tomorrow, I will speak, Hana said quietly. No matter what they threaten, I will speak the truth where everyone can hear it. The old woman nodded. They will punish you. Yes, but silence is worse. Rain began to fall again, soft at first, then harder. The women pulled tarps tighter. Children whimpered. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Hana pressed the hidden paper deeper into the hem of her dress and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, the storm would break. One way or another, rain returned before dawn. Not the gentle drizzle of yesterday, but heavy sheets that turned the ground into rivers of red mud. Langston was on fatigue duty now, hauling sandbags, digging drainage ditches, work reserved for men being punished. Wheeler worked beside him, knee-deep in mud. "This is wrong, Cole. You should be in the aid station." Langston drove his shovel into the earth. "Just dig." Nearby, Sergeant Harlan inspected a culvert that channeled runoff away from the camp. Water rushed through it, brown and angry. He knelt down, peering at the concrete edges. His father had been a construction foreman back home. Harlan knew when something was about to fail. "This won't hold," he muttered. Lieutenant Whitaker appeared under a canvas tarp, dry and irritated. "Sergeant, I need those supply reports." "Sir, we've got a problem. The culvert upstream is cracking. If it gives way, the whole drainage system fails. Water will flood the lower pens." Whitaker glanced at the razor wire enclosure where Hannah and the others were held. It sat in a shallow depression, the lowest point in the camp. "We'll monitor it," Whitaker said. "I'm not relocating prisoners based on weather." "Sir, there are children down there." "Then they'll stay dry under the tarps. That's what tarps are for." Langston stopped digging. He looked at Harlan, then at the pen. Rain was already pooling near the wire. "Request permission to move the children to higher ground, sir," Langston said. Whitaker turned slowly. "You don't have authority to request anything, Private. You're on work detail." "Sir, if that culvert fails—" "Enough." Whitaker's voice was sharp. "Get back to work." But Harlan didn't move. He stood there, water dripping from his helmet, staring at the pen. Then he turned to a young private standing nearby. "Go check the upstream culvert. Report back immediately." The private ran. Whitaker's jaw tightened. "Sergeant, I didn't authorize." The private returned 5 minutes later, soaked and breathing hard. "It's cracking, Sarge." "Bad. Could go any minute." Thunder rolled across the sky. The wind picked up. Canvas snapped and whipped. Harlan looked from the pen to Whitaker's tent, then back again. His hands curled into fists. "Sergeant?" the private asked. Harlan made his choice. "Get ropes. Get every man you can find. We're evacuating that pen. Now." Water surged through the camp with terrifying speed. The culvert gave way with a sound like a rifle crack, and a wall of muddy water roared downhill toward the razor wire pen. Hannah heard it first. She stood, grabbed the nearest child, and shouted in Japanese, "Get to the high side, now!" Women screamed, children cried. The water hit the lower fence posts and kept coming, knee-deep in seconds. Langston was already running. He grabbed a coil of rope from a supply tent and sprinted toward the pen. Wheeler was right behind him. Harlan bellowed orders, waving MPs and soldiers toward the fence. "Cut the wire! Get them out!" But the wire was thick, wrapped in 3 layers. The gate was on the low side, already submerged. Water poured through gaps in the stakes, flooding the interior. Langston didn't wait for permission. He waded in, water up to his thighs, then his waist. A little boy clung to a tent pole. Screaming, Langston reached him, pulled him free, and passed him to Wheeler at the fence line. "Make a chain," Harlan shouted. "Hand them across." Soldiers hesitated. White MPs looked at black medics. Everyone looked at the Japanese civilians thrashing in the water. Then Harlan stepped into the current beside Langston. "You heard me. Move!" The hesitation broke. Men formed a line. One by one, they pulled children and women from the rising water. A crate of medical supplies floated past. Wheeler lunged and caught it before it disappeared downstream. Hannah stood chest-deep, holding 2 orphans above the surface. She'd torn another strip from her dress to bind a gash on one child's leg, blood mixed with muddy water. Langston waded toward her. "Give them to me!" She pushed the children toward him. He grabbed them, turned, and passed them down the human chain. Hands, black hands, white hands, received them and pulled them to safety. The wire gave way at one corner. The fence sagged. Panic rippled through the crowd. "Hold the line!" Harlan's voice cut through the chaos. "One more run!" But Hana, Sato, and two other orphans were still inside. The current was deepening. A tent collapsed, dragging tarps and blankets into the churning water. Langston looked at Harlan. Harlan looked back, then nodded. Together, they went back in. The water was chest deep now, cold despite the tropical heat. Langston fought the current, his boots slipping on submerged debris. Beside him, Harlan moved with grim determination, rope tied around his waist. Hana stood with the last two children on what had been a raised wooden platform. Sato clung to a fence post, too weak to move on his own. "Hana!" Langston shouted over the roar. "Send the children first!" She lifted a little girl, maybe 5 years old, and held her out. Langston took her, passed her to Harlan, who passed her to Wheeler waiting at the fence. The chain worked. The girl reached dry ground, coughing, but alive. The second child, a boy with bandaged hands, came next. Then only Hana and Sato remained. "Go!" Hana shouted to Langston. "Take him!" Sato was shaking, his wounded leg barely supporting his weight. Langston grabbed him under the arms and started toward the fence. Harlan steadied them both as the current tried to sweep them sideways. They were halfway across when Sato slipped. His leg gave out. Langston tightened his grip, but the water pulled harder. For a moment, they both went under. Hands grabbed Langston's jacket. Harlan hauled them up, sputtering and gasping. Together, they dragged Sato to the fence line, where Wheeler and two other soldiers pulled him through. Langston turned back. Hana was alone now, standing on the platform as water lapped at her knees. The structure groaned beneath her weight. He waded back in. "You have to come now," he called. "The children are safe?" "Yes, all of them. Now come on." Hana stepped into the water. It rose to her chest immediately. Langston reached her, grabbed her hand, the first time they'd touched, and pulled her toward the fence. The platform collapsed behind them with a crash. They stumbled through the current together. Harlan extended the rope. Langston grabbed it with one hand, held Hana with the other. Step by step, they fought their way to solid ground. When they finally collapsed on the muddy bank, the rain was already easing. Clouds thinned. A shaft of sunlight broke through, harsh and bright. All around them, people stood in shock. Black soldiers, white MPs, Japanese civilians, all soaked, all breathing hard. They just saved each other's lives. The mess tent had been converted into a drying station. Stoves burned hot, steaming wet uniforms. Blankets were passed out. Coffee appeared in tin cups, bitter and strong. Langston wrapped a child in a dry blanket. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline draining away. Across the tent, Hana took inventory of the survivors, counting heads, checking for injuries. Her hair was plastered to her face, her dress torn in 3 places now. Wheeler handed out coffee, his usual jokes silenced by exhaustion. Harlan stood near the entrance, watching. He hadn't said a word since the rescue ended. His uniform was caked with mud, his face drawn. Langston met his eyes. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Harlan nodded, slow, deliberate. The first honest acknowledgement that what they'd done mattered more than regulations. Lieutenant Whitaker appeared in the doorway. His uniform was still clean. He'd watched the rescue from the ridge. "There will be a disciplinary review," he announced. His voice was calm, controlled. "Unauthorized evacuation, breach of containment protocol, destruction of military property." The tent went silent. Hana stood. Water dripped from her clothes onto the wooden planks. She faced Whitaker directly. "Then let us meet openly," she said. Her voice carried across the tent, clear and firm. "With witnesses, let everyone hear the truth." Whitaker's jaw tightened. "Miss Ishikawa, you're in no position." "I am in every position. You have accused an innocent man. You have hidden the real threat. And now you would punish those who saved lives." She paused. "I will speak tomorrow. At dawn. In front of everyone." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Soldiers glanced at each other. A black stevedore nodded slightly. A white corporal looked uncomfortable. Whitaker's mask of control cracked for just a second. Then he smiled, thin and cold. "Very well. Dawn, by the flagpole. We'll see what truth looks like." He turned and walked out. Hannah sat down, suddenly exhausted. A child leaned against her shoulder. She stroked the girl's wet hair and closed her eyes. Across the tent, Langston realized what she'd just done. She'd forced the confrontation into the open. No more closed hearings. No more controlled statements. Tomorrow everyone would see, everyone would hear, and that terrified him. Dawn came clear and cool. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and the ground soft. By the flagpole, soldiers gathered in loose clusters, some curious, some resentful, some just looking for a break from routine. Langston stood at attention in a clean uniform. His medic tab was still missing, confiscated during his suspension. But his spine was straight, his jaw set. Hannah arrived escorted by 2 MPs. Her hair was pinned back neatly. The tears in her dress had been stitched again, the repairs visible like scars. She moved to the center of the assembly area and faced the crowd. Lieutenant Whitaker stood to one side with a small group of officers. Sergeant Harlan stood apart, arms folded. Wheeler positioned himself near Langston, close enough to step in if needed. An older officer, the camp surgeon, stepped forward. "Miss Ishikawa, you requested this assembly. You may speak." Hannah took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. "On June 12th, a young soldier forced a grenade on me. He was terrified. He had been ordered to prevent surrender by any means. I took the grenade to protect the children hiding under the cots. PFC Cole saw it. He tore my dress to remove it and threw it away before it could explode." She paused. "He saved my life. He saved the children. And for this, he has been punished." The crowd was silent. Hannah continued. "The soldier who gave me the grenade was named Sato. He is here. He will tell you the same." She gestured toward the infirmary tent. Sato was brought forward, pale but standing. In halting English, Sato confirmed her story. He named the man who'd ordered him, a civilian informant who worked with the Americans. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Hannah reached into the hem of her dress and pulled out the scrap of paper Sato had given her. She held it up. "This is proof. A memo with initials, JW, dates that match intelligence reports." Whitaker stepped forward. "That's a forgery. Enemy propaganda." But Hannah didn't flinch. She handed the paper to the surgeon. He examined it carefully, turned it over, held it to the light. His expression changed. "This is Army stationery," the surgeon said quietly. "These code notations are authentic." The crowd shifted. Soldiers murmured to each other. Hannah pointed toward the edge of the assembly. "The man who ordered this is there, the civilian helper. He has been protected, and PFC Cole has been punished for saving lives." All eyes turned. A middle-aged Japanese man in civilian clothes stood frozen. Then he bolted. Chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted. The surgeon barked orders. MPs dragged the struggling informant toward the command tent while he screamed in Japanese. Lieutenant Whitaker's face went white, then red. "This is a breach of protocol. Sergeant Harlan, contain this situation." But Harlan didn't move. He stared at Whitaker with something close to disgust. "Sergeant, I gave you an order." "No, sir." Harlan's voice was quiet but firm. "I won't." The surgeon turned to Whitaker. "Lieutenant, you're relieved of duty pending investigation. Report to headquarters. Now." "You can't, this is—" Whitaker sputtered, his careful mask completely shattered. "Now, Lieutenant." 2 officers escorted Whitaker away. He went rigid with fury. But he went. The surgeon addressed the assembly. "This matter will be reviewed properly. PFC Cole's suspension is vacated, effective immediately. He is restored to full medical duty." He looked at Langston. Return to your post, Private. No fanfare, no apology, just bureaucratic correction, quiet and bloodless. But around the assembly area, something had shifted. Black soldiers stood a little straighter. A few white MPs looked ashamed. Japanese civilians watched with cautious hope. Harlan approached Langston. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the medic tab, the one Langston had surrendered days ago. It had been washed, the mud scrubbed away. "A kid found this in the flood," Harlan said. "Thought you'd want it back." Langston took it, his throat tight. "Thank you, Sergeant." Harlan hesitated, then extended his hand. Langston shook it. Across the assembly area, Hannah stood surrounded by children. She was exhausted, her dress still damp, her hair coming loose from its pins, but her eyes were bright. She caught Langston's gaze and bowed deeply. He bowed back, just as deep. Around them, the camp slowly returned to motion. Work details formed. Breakfast was served. The war machine preferred quiet corrections, and it had made one. But everyone who'd witnessed this moment knew something impossible had just happened. A Japanese woman had defended a black American soldier in front of white officers, and the truth had won. The medical headquarters tent smelled of canvas and coffee. The surgeon sat behind a folding desk, reading statements. Lieutenant Whitaker had been escorted to a transport vehicle an hour ago, his face stone as he climbed aboard. Langston stood at ease, hands behind his back. Hannah sat on a wooden chair, composed despite her exhaustion. Wheeler gave his account of the grenade incident. Sato, barely strong enough to stand, confirmed everything. Then Harlan stepped forward. "I need to make a statement, sir." The surgeon looked up. "Go ahead, Sergeant." Harlan's jaw worked. "At the first hearing, I stayed silent. I knew Miss Ishikawa was telling the truth. I knew PFC Cole acted properly, but I didn't speak up." He paused. "I chose my career over what was right." The tent was completely quiet. Harlan unpinned his MP badge and set it on the desk. The metal made a soft sound against the wood. "I won't make that choice again, sir." The surgeon studied him for a long moment. Then he pushed the badge back across the desk. "Keep it, Sergeant. You'll need it to do better next time." Harlan picked up the badge slowly, his hand shaking slightly. The surgeon shuffled papers. "Lieutenant Whitaker is relieved of all duties pending a full investigation. The charges against PFC Cole are dismissed. He is restored to medical duty with no disciplinary record." He looked at Langston. "You're free to return to work." No apology. No acknowledgement of what had been stolen from him. Just administrative correction, cold and efficient. But it was something. The surgeon closed his folder. "This matter is need to know only. No public statements, no records beyond what's necessary. Understood?" They all nodded. The machine preferred quiet. The machine always preferred quiet. Outside, rumors were already spreading, this time in Langston's favor. Soldiers whispered about the flood rescue, about Hannah's testimony, about Whitaker being led away. The truth was out. Not officially, not in any report that would survive the war, but it was out. The aid station felt familiar again, like putting on an old coat. Langston moved between cots, checking pulses, changing dressings. His hands knew the work. The work steadied him. The tension that had coiled through the ward for days was finally gone. Even the air felt lighter. 2 white clerks passed by the tent entrance. They glanced at Langston, then quickly looked away. No smirks, no muttered insults. Just shame, quiet and unspoken. A black stevedore carrying a supply crate gave Langston a subtle nod. Respect coded in a language the army couldn't regulate. Near sunset, a runner arrived with papers. Wheeler took them, read, and his smile faded. "What is it?" Langston asked. "Transfer orders. Hannah and the orphans. They're being moved to a civilian camp tomorrow morning. Better facilities. Safer." Langston's chest tightened. He'd known this was coming. The military didn't leave loose ends in place. Hannah had embarrassed officers, exposed corruption. She'd be moved somewhere quieter, where her testimony couldn't cause more trouble. He looked across the ward. Hannah was braiding a little girl's hair, her fingers patient and gentle. She hadn't heard the news yet. Wheeler touched Langston's shoulder. "You saved each other, Cole. That doesn't go away just because she leaves." Langston nodded, not trusting his voice. Outside, the sun sank toward the ocean. Long shadows stretched across the camp. Somewhere, a radio played swing music. Life continued, indifferent to individual losses. But Langston felt the weight of tomorrow already pressing down. They'd won something real, truth, vindication, lives saved. And tomorrow it would cost them the quiet understanding they'd built across wire and war. He returned to his work, because work was all he could control. Evening fell soft and warm. In the barracks tent, Langston sat at a makeshift writing table, a plank balanced on 2 crates. A hooded lantern cast yellow light across the paper in front of him. He wrote carefully, knowing censors would read every word. "Dear Mama, I tore a dress to save a life. People saw the wrong thing at first. Some finally saw the right thing. The woman I helped stood up and told the truth even when it cost her. I'm back at work now. I'm all right. You told me to keep my head down. I tried. But sometimes keeping your head down means watching people die when you could have helped. I couldn't do that. I hope you understand. I love you. I'll write again when I can." He folded the letter and sealed it. The mail would take weeks, maybe months. She'd worry until it arrived. Wheeler sat on his bunk, cleaning his boots. "You did good, Cole. Don't let anyone tell you different. I just did my job. That's more than most people can say." Footsteps approached the tent. Sergeant Harlan appeared in the entrance, his cap in his hands. He looked awkward, uncertain. Nothing like the rigid MP who'd cuffed Langston a week ago. "Private Cole, can I have a moment?" Langston stood. "Sergeant." Harlan shifted his weight. "I wanted to say what I did during the hearing. Staying silent, that was wrong. I knew better. I should have spoken up." "Yes, sir. You should have." Harlan flinched but nodded. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't hate you, Sergeant. I'm just tired of having to be perfect to survive while other people get to be human." The words hung in the air. Harlan absorbed them, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out the medic tab, the one he'd returned that morning. "This got dirty in the flood," Harlan said. "A kid brought it to me, said you dropped it saving his life." He held it out. "It's been washed, dried. You should have it back, properly." Langston took it. The fabric was clean, the stitching intact. Someone, maybe Harlan himself, had cared for it. "Thank you, Sergeant." Harlan put his cap back on and straightened. "For what it's worth, Cole, you're a hell of a medic, and a better man than I've been." He left before Langston could respond. Wheeler let out a low whistle. "Never thought I'd see that." Langston turned the medic tab over in his hands. Tomorrow, Hannah would leave. But tonight, he had this. Proof that even small truths could crack through years of hardened prejudice. He tucked the tab into his breast pocket, next to his mother's letter and his heart. Morning came too quickly. The sun rose bright and hard over the motor pool, where trucks idled, engines warming. Exhaust ribbons curled in the still air. Hannah stood with the children, each one holding a paper crane folded from scrap paper. Her hair was neatly braided, her dress torn, stitched. Torn again, stitched again. Told the whole story in fabric and thread. Langston approached in his pressed uniform, the medic tab visible on his jacket. Harlan supervised the loading, keeping his distance to give them space. Wheeler stood back, arms folded, giving them privacy. Hannah saw Langston and bowed slightly. He bowed back. "The children are well?" he asked. "Yes, thanks to you. Thanks to everyone who helped." She reached into a small cloth bundle and pulled out a carefully folded item. The medic tab. Not the one Harlan had returned, another one. The one Langston had lost in the flood. "I found this in the mud," Hannah said. "After the water went down, it was ruined, so I cleaned it, stitched it. I wanted you to have it back." She paused, "So you don't forget where it fell." She handed him the tab, along with a folded paper crane, tiny and precise. Langston took them, his throat tight. The tab had been meticulously repaired, every thread in place. It was more than clean, it was honored. "Thank you," he managed. "No, thank you, for seeing me as a person, not just an enemy, not just a woman. A person." They stood 2 feet apart. Regulations, guards, and the weight of 2 nations at war filled the space between them. They couldn't shake hands, couldn't embrace, could barely speak, but they could bow. Hana bowed deeply. The formal bow was profound respect. Langston mirrored her, just as deep, holding the position longer than protocol required. Around them, soldiers watched in silence. Some looked away. Some couldn't stop staring. A black stevedore removed his cap. A white MP shifted uncomfortably. Engines revved. Harlan signaled the convoy forward. Hana climbed aboard the truck. The children waved their paper cranes, bright against the olive-drab canvas. Dust rose as the vehicles pulled away, heading south toward the safer camps. Langston stood watching until the convoy disappeared. Then he tucked the repaired medic tab and the paper crane into his breast pocket, right next to the first tab, right next to his mother's letter. Wheeler walked up beside him. "She's something else." "Yeah," Langston said quietly. "She is." The dust settled slowly, golden in the morning light. By afternoon, the aid station was full again. New arrivals, Marines with shrapnel wounds, soldiers with infections, the endless parade of war's damage. Langston worked with quiet purpose, his hands steady. Wheeler joked softly while changing bandages. The rhythm of the work was familiar, comforting. This was where he belonged. A young Marine with shrapnel in his shoulder watched Langston prepare instruments. "You the guy who pulled people out of the flood?" Langston didn't look up, just did what needed doing. "Heard you saved a bunch of kids, enemy kids." "They're just kids." The Marine was quiet for a moment. "My little sister's about that age, 6, maybe 7. I'd want someone to help her if she needed it. Doesn't matter who." Langston met his eyes. "Breathe steady now. This is going to hurt, but I'll be quick." He extracted the shrapnel cleanly, bandaged the wound, and moved to the next patient. On the edge of a cot, someone had left a string of paper cranes, the ones the children had made before they left. The ward staff had let them hang from a tent pole. A small rebellion, a rule broken that harmed no one. A courier arrived with a dispatch. Wheeler read it and grinned. "Whitaker's been transported to rear command for review. Full investigation." "They're talking about court-martial." Langston didn't smile. "They'll bury it. Give him a quiet discharge, maybe. The Army doesn't like public scandals." "Maybe, but at least he's gone. For now." Wheeler's grin faded. "You think there'll be others like him?" "I know there will be." Langston finished wrapping a bandage. "But there'll be people like Hana, too. And Harlan, maybe. And you. People who choose right when it costs them something." "That enough?" "Has to be." Outside, the sun began its slow descent. The war continued. Somewhere north, fighting still raged. Men still died. But here, in this tent, lives were being saved, one bandage at a time. And that was power. Real power. The kind no officer could strip away with paperwork. Sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. The field hospital settled into its evening rhythm. Quiet conversations, the clink of instruments being cleaned, the soft moans of men seeking sleep. Langston stood by his cot, holding the 2 medic tabs. One was the original, returned by Harlan. The other was Hana's gift, carefully stitched with thread stripped from bandages. He chose Hana's. The stitching was visible where floodwater had frayed it. Each repair telling part of the story. He pinned it to his jacket, just above his heart. The paper crane went into his breast pocket, folded alongside his mother's letter. 3 small things. 3 reminders of why he was here, what he'd survived, and what he'd learned. A child's laugh rang out somewhere across the camp. Probably from the safer area where Japanese civilians were housed, now under better conditions, Harlan's doing. Small mercies in a merciless world. Langston stepped outside. The blackout shades would drop soon, but for now, the last light held. He could see the perimeter wire, the motor pool, the rows of tents stretching toward the ocean. He pulled out his dented harmonica and played a few notes. The tune started thin and uncertain, then found its strength. It wasn't a song anyone would recognize, just something he'd learned from his grandfather, a melody that spoke of home and hope and stubborn survival. Wheeler stepped out of the aid station and listened, smiling. Across the camp, a few soldiers paused in their work to hear it. The music drifted on the evening air, carried by the same wind that had brought the storm, the same current that had nearly swept them all away. Langston played until the sun touched the horizon. Then he tucked the harmonica away and returned to the ward. There were patients to check, medications to distribute, 100 small tasks that added up to something that mattered. No medals waited for him. No promotion. No official recognition of what he'd endured or what he'd accomplished. But he had the stitched fabric at his chest. Proof that courage could cross every line the world tried to draw. He had the crane in his pocket. Proof that grace existed even in war. And he had his work, the kind that saved lives regardless of uniform or skin or nation. As darkness fell and the blackout shades dropped, Langston moved through the ward with calm efficiency. His face was peaceful, his purpose clear. What had shocked everyone wasn't the scandal they'd imagined. It was the truth they'd witnessed. An enemy woman defending a black medic, a handful of people choosing conscience over career, and the quiet miracle of two human beings bowing to each other across barbed wire and prejudice and war. The story would fade from official records, but everyone who'd been there would carry it forward, a small light against the darkness. And sometimes, Langston thought, as he adjusted a soldier's blanket and checked another's pulse, sometimes that was enough.